It was a chilly evening in Manhattan when the news broke. A cybercriminal syndicate had infiltrated one of the world's largest financial networks, threatening to siphon off $50 million from a billionaire's accounts within hours. Panic swept through the office of Alexander Drake, a tech-savvy billionaire whose fortune was rivaled only by the secrecy surrounding it. His security team was frantic. Firewalls were failing, and time was slipping away like sand through a sieve. Meanwhile, across town in a cramped, dimly lit shelter, Marlene Hayes, a widowed former cybersecurity analyst, was quietly sipping her lukewarm coffee, scanning online forums for freelance gigs. Life had been cruel. Her husband passed away in a tragic accident, leaving her homeless, and the world seemed to have forgotten her. Yet, there was one thing Marlene had never lost: her mind, sharp, analytical, unyielding. And tonight, that mind would be tested like never before. A frantic call from an anonymous contact popped up on her old, barely working laptop. $50 million at risk. Can you help? Marlene hesitated. She wasn't in the business of billionaires' games, but curiosity and the challenge sparked something deep inside her. Within minutes, she was diving into code, tracing the hacker's digital footprints, piecing together a puzzle that would make most experts crumble under pressure. In the Drake Tower, Alexander was pacing, muttering to himself, sweating through his tailored suit. His team was exhausted, but no one could crack the sophisticated malware that had infiltrated his systems. Then, an encrypted message arrived on a secure channel. "I can solve it. Give me access." At first, he thought it was a prank, but the desperation in the voice on the other end was unmistakable, calm yet urgent, like someone who had faced impossible odds and survived. Marlene quickly located the source of the cyber attack, a shadowy server hidden beneath layers of proxies and firewalls. She began deploying countermeasures, reverse engineering the malware with a precision born from years of experience. Each line of code she wrote was like a scalpel, dissecting the enemy's strategy. Hours passed, tension mounting. Alexander watched the progress through a secure video feed, astonished by the determination of a woman he had never met. Living in circumstances he couldn't imagine, she worked tirelessly, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her mind connecting dots that no one else even saw. Then, just as the hackers attempted to transfer the money, Marlene struck. With a final keystroke, she not only stopped the transfer but traced the attack back to its origin, exposing the syndicate behind it. For a brief moment, silence fell in both the Drake Tower and the shelter across town. Alexander's heart raced as he realized what had just happened. The $50 million was safe, and the identity of the hackers was now in the hands of law enforcement, all thanks to a homeless widow who refused to let her past define her worth. But the story didn't end there. Alexander knew someone with skills like Marlene's couldn't remain in the shadows. He had questions. How did she end up here? Why had she disappeared from the world of cybersecurity? And more importantly, what would she do next now that she had reminded the world and him what true brilliance looked like? Alexander Drake didn't sleep that night. Even with the immediate threat neutralized, his mind kept circling back to Marlene. The world had labeled her invisible, a woman forgotten by circumstance, but in that small, dimly lit room somewhere in Manhattan, she had wielded power most men could only dream of. By sunrise, he had already drafted a plan, not just to thank her, but to find out everything about the woman who had just saved him from financial ruin. Meanwhile, Marlene sat in her shelter, exhausted but exhilarated. Her fingers still hovered over the keyboard, her mind replaying every move she had made during the counterattack. There was an undeniable thrill in outsmarting the best, even if it came cloaked in danger. She knew the risks of being discovered. High-profile hackers were not to be trifled with. But for the first time in years, she felt alive. Her phone buzzed with a secure notification, an encrypted message from someone who simply wrote, "Meet me. I owe you more than you know. A.D." At first, she hesitated. Meetings with billionaires were not her world. She didn't have silk suits, expensive cars, or polished shoes. Her world was the glow of the laptop screen, the hum of servers, and the quiet solitude of survival. But curiosity won. She packed what little she had into a worn backpack, checked herself in the mirror, and stepped into the unknown, feeling like she was walking into a universe that had forgotten she existed. The Drake Tower loomed over the city like a crystal fortress. Security was tight, but Alexander had personally vouched for her, giving her access codes that bypassed the usual labyrinth of gates. She fell out of place among the marble floors, the polished glass walls, and the quiet confidence of people who never had to worry about rent. Yet, every step she took echoed her own internal determination. She had been underestimated before, and she wasn't about to let it happen again. Alexander met her personally in the penthouse, a sleek office overlooking the city skyline. For a man used to deference. The sight of Marlene, disheveled, tired, yet undeniably sharp, was both shocking and oddly inspiring. "Marlene," he said, extending his hand, "I need to understand how you did it." She shook his hand, firm but wary. "It's not magic," she replied quietly. "It's logic, patterns, and knowing that most people give up too early. The rest is just knowing where to look." He studied her, trying to read between the lines of a life he couldn't begin to imagine. "You could have made millions on this," he said, referring to the cyber attack she had foiled. "Why didn't you? Why did you stay hidden?" Marlene's eyes flickered with shadow of pain, a memory she hadn't shared with anyone in years. "Because I lost more than money," she said softly. "I lost a life I thought I'd have. And then I realized I didn't need the world's approval. I just needed to keep my mind sharp. That was enough." Alexander leaned back, intrigued. "Not enough for me. I want you on my team." She laughed, a dry, almost incredulous sound. "You mean work for a billionaire? I don't even have a business card." "I don't care about cards or titles," he said, leaning forward, intensity in his gaze. "I care about talent. And you just saved me from losing $50 million. That alone proves you belong in a place where your skills aren't wasted. Think about what you could do with resources, freedom, and support." Marlene's mind raced. She had always wanted to make a difference, to use her skills for something bigger than survival. Yet the idea of stepping into a world so alien to her, surrounded by wealth and influence, terrified her. But there was something in Alexander's eyes, a mix of respect and urgency, that made her consider it. For once, she felt the possibility of not just surviving, but thriving. Days turned into weeks, and Marlene began integrating into Alexander's operations. She was given access to state-of-the-art technology, a team of experts, and a kind of freedom she hadn't known existed since her husband's death. Yet, even with all this, she didn't forget her roots. She still remembered the nights she had spent in shelters, the hunger, the isolation. And it was that memory that drove her to propose something radical, a program to train overlooked, underestimated individuals, people society had given up on in cybersecurity and problem-solving. Alexander, initially skeptical, soon realized she wasn't just saving him from hackers. She was saving a future generation of minds that could change the world. The first recruits arrived from shelters, community centers, even halfway houses. And under Marlene's guidance, they flourished. Within months, the program was producing cybersecurity prodigies who were already making headlines for uncovering fraud, stopping digital heists, and assisting law enforcement in ways no traditional training could. But the syndicate that had once tried to steal Alexander's fortune didn't forget. They watched in the shadows, angry, desperate, and vengeful. They had underestimated Marlene once, but they wouldn't make the same mistake again. Late one night, as she was working on a particularly complex algorithm, her screen flickered, an ominous, familiar warning signal. Someone had breached a minor node in her network, probing, testing. Her heart raced, but she didn't panic. She was ready. Alexander arrived moments later, sensing the tension. "They found you," he said, calm but serious. "Are you ready for round 2? Marlene smiled faintly, her fingers already flying over the keyboard. "I was born ready," she replied. And just like that, the game shifted. The hunter became the hunted. And Marlene knew that every move she made from now on wouldn't just protect billions of dollars. It could decide the fate of countless lives. As the city slept below them, the penthouse lights burned bright, illuminating the determined widow who refused to be invisible, and the billionaire who finally understood that true power isn't wealth, It's intellect, courage, and the unyielding will to fight back when the world has written you off. The battle was far from over, and as the syndicate tightened its grip, Marlene realized something important. She wasn't just saving money or lives. She was rewriting her own story, from one of loss and invisibility to one of strategy, respect, and undeniable influence. The game had changed, and for the first time in years, she felt in control. But as her screen lit up with a series of encrypted messages, each more threatening than the last, she understood one undeniable truth. This wasn't just about hackers. This was personal, and Marlene was ready to make it pay. If you want, I can continue from here with the story escalating into a high-stakes cyber espionage thriller where Marlene and Alexander go head-to-head with the syndicate with twists, betrayals, and unexpected allies, keeping viewers glued to the screen. The tension in the penthouse was electric. The city below slept unaware, but the war raging on the digital plane was far from over. Every hacker, every shadowy figure in the syndicate had underestimated Marlene Hayes. They thought a homeless widow was powerless. They thought her life, fractured and silent, made her weak. They were wrong. Hours turned into days, but Marlene remained relentless. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned lines of code like a maestro conducting a symphony. Each keystroke was deliberate, calculated, and devastatingly effective. She traced the syndicate's moves with precision that made the hackers question if they were being watched by more than just a person. They feared a force, a mind that seemed to anticipate every malicious strategy before it could even be deployed. Alexander watched in awe, often forgetting to breathe. He had fought many battles in the business world, faced ruthless competitors, and navigated treacherous deals. But nothing compared to this. Here was a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to prove, wielding intellect like a sword and courage like a shield. She had transformed the Drake Tower from a fortress of wealth into a command center for justice, for strategy, for retribution. Then, in the dead of night, the breakthrough came. Marlene had pinpointed the syndicate's command hub, a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Every system, every proxy, every digital footprint led here. With a calculated calm, she orchestrated a cyber attack unlike any the world had ever seen. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about power. It was about exposing corruption, protecting innocent lives, and rewriting the rules of a game the syndicate thought they controlled. Alexander called the authorities and a private security task force, carefully orchestrating a real-world strike, while Marlene executed the digital one. When the raid hit, the syndicate was caught in a perfect trap. Their systems neutralized, their leaders unmasked, their plans in ruins. The headlines the next day were explosive. Homeless widow outsmarts Billionaire's most dangerous cybercriminals. Social media exploded with admiration, awe, and disbelief. Everyone wanted to know who Marlene Hayes was. But she didn't care about fame. She cared about justice, about proving that intelligence and resilience could triumph over circumstance. And yet, the impact of her actions began to ripple outward in ways even she hadn't imagined. Victims of the syndicate came forward, sharing stories of fraud, stolen savings, and ruined lives. Thanks to her, not only was $50 million saved, but countless other fortune, careers, and dreams were restored. People she had never met were able to sleep safely, knowing someone was watching, someone who refused to let evil prevail. Alexander approached her in the penthouse, looking at her with a mixture of admiration and deep respect. "Marlene, you've changed more than my life. You've changed the world," he said. She smiled, a mixture of humility and quiet triumph. "I just did what had to be done," she replied. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She had turned her pain into purpose, her loss into power. She had rewritten the story of her life in a way no one, not even the richest men in the world, could dictate. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Marlene's Cybersecurity Academy for underprivileged talent became an international phenomenon. Media outlets covered her story endlessly. She was invited to speak at conferences, governments consulted her on cybersecurity strategies, and private corporations sought her expertise. But she remained grounded, never forgetting the shelter that had been her home, the nights she had faced hunger, the isolation that had taught her to rely on her mind and her will. Through it all, her relationship with Alexander evolved. He was no longer just a billionaire she had helped. He was a partner in vision, someone who understood her worth, her talent, and her unshakable determination. Together, they began initiatives to protect not just wealth, but people, innovating cybersecurity programs, charitable projects, and social reforms that lifted countless lives from despair. One evening, as they overlooked the skyline from the Drake Tower, Alexander turned to her. "You saved me, Marlene. And in doing so, you saved so many more. But there's something else. I want to make sure the world knows your story the right way, not just as a headline, but as an inspiration." Marlene's eyes glistened, not with tears of fame, but with pride. "Then let them know what happens when a person refuses to give up. Let them know that it's never too late to reclaim your life." In the months that followed, the world watched as Marlene's legend grew. Documentaries were made, interviews aired, and her initiatives reached every corner of the globe. Children who had felt invisible now had heroes to look up to. Adults who had lost hope now found courage in her example. The woman who had once been homeless had not just survived. She had sparked a movement, proving that intelligence, resilience, and integrity could shatter barriers no amount of wealth or influence could erect. And yet, for Marlene, the most satisfying victories were personal. She had found her voice, her purpose, and a life that mattered. She no longer walked the streets in silence. She walked with the confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Alexander often marveled at her, realizing that the true wealth he had gained wasn't his accounts or his assets. It was in the brilliance, courage, and heart of the woman who had saved him from ruin and, in the process, reshaped the world. But the story didn't just end with accolades or financial triumphs. Every challenge Marlene faced, every obstacle she overcame, became a beacon for others. Her life became a testament to the power of perseverance, the strength found in intellect, and the undeniable force of a determined spirit. People no longer asked who she was. They knew what she represented: hope, skill, and unstoppable courage. And as the city lights sparkled beneath them one quiet night, Marlene and Alexander stood together, not as savior and rescued, not as billionaire and homeless widow, but as equals. Two minds united by respect, vision, and the understanding that when the world writes you off, the only limit is the one you accept yourself. The syndicate, dismantled and exposed, could never rise again. But Marlene knew that evil, in some form, always lingered. And that was fine, because she had proven that brilliance paired with determination, courage paired with focus, and heart paired with skill could not only survive the darkest storms but rewrite the future entirely. Her story became a legend whispered across boardrooms, schools, shelters, and online forums. It was no longer about $50 million, cyber attacks, or near-impossible odds. It was about what it meant to fight when everyone else had given up, to rise when the world had forgotten you, and to shine with a light so bright that even the shadows had no choice but to retreat. In the end, Marlene Hayes didn't just save a billionaire or millions of dollars. She saved hope itself. She proved that life's cruel twists could be transformed into triumphs, that intelligence and integrity were mightier than any wealth, and that even in the face of darkness, one determined person could change everything. And as the skyline glimmered like 1,000 tiny stars, reflecting in her eyes, Marlene knew this was only the beginning. The